Live. Hey,
we are live.
Everybody.
Wow.
Hi, everybody. Nice show, everybody. See you next week.
You missed it. We're done.
Well, we have anybody in here tonight?
Not quite yet.
Nobody?
But it is still season 4, episode 2. And we are lucky enough to have Victor from Vic's Miniatures with us tonight, graciously hanging out with us. And and so and as usual, tonight Rusty is hosting, and you have his partner here from Heresy Productions. And thanks for joining, everybody, or coming, stopping by. Yeah. Let's see.
Well,
hopefully, I haven't scared anybody away.
Well, at least not yet. I don't know. I'd say with that thing across your chest, you might scare people.
Hey, you got to represent. You know?
What, do we have some DC fans in the house? What do you mean?
Yeah.
So,
I was just talking to my son the other day, and he's like, "Well, you think your Twins are going to do good this season in the postseason?" No, the Yankees are in the postseason. We never win anything when the Yankees are in the postseason.
Boy, I tell you, I was watching the game last night, and I thought we had blown it. To be honest with you, I did not see us coming back the way they did last night. I was blown away. I was not expecting it. I thought there was going to be a game 3 tonight.
Oh yeah.
No,
well, you move on.
That's right.
The matter of the game.
That's right.
Some of us do not.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Now they got to go play the Rays, so it's going to be tough. The Rays have been very difficult to beat for the Yankees this year. So
that they have.
So we'll see what happens.
Looks like
yeah, Kirby Puckett. Yeah, he's the man.
Looks like we do have the Jank Master in the house has joined us. Hello there, Rob. Awesome. Yeah, we usually have folks trickle in as we get started. And so, so Victor, we usually do a couple typical things when we start our show because it's every 2 weeks. We usually will ask folks what they're up to and basically have them show if they're working on anything or purchased anything recently or anything new for their hobby. It doesn't have, depends on how busy you are. I've not been as busy lately, so I'm setting myself up for an excuse coming up. But then, and then as well, if you, it's definitely not required. I don't even think I mentioned it before the show, but we always have a musty drink, Rusty and I. We usually show what we're bringing and sipping on during the show. This is actually an adult show, so we actually do sip on a drink while we're hanging out as well.
And you let me in?
You
let me in?
Adult, yeah. Well, I should say that lightly because we're kind of
we are adult and look.
We're all playing with toys.
A different thing.
We're all playing with toys. This is an adult show.
They're adult toys.
Yeah, that's right. They're not toys. They're collectibles.
Yeah.
So, if you'd like to just sort of tell us, and also if you'd like, for those that actually most people probably know you on our channels, but if anybody's out there that doesn't, if you want to just sort of talk about your YouTube channel a bit too, that's also cool.
Okay, we'll start with that first. So I'm Victor, and I have Vic's Miniatures YouTube channel. On that, I do wargaming figures, so I do a lot of historical stuff. I also paint large-scale figures, so busts, 54 millimeter and up statues and things like that. Currently, I am working on a Pulp Alley set. It's called The Museum. It's actually from Sally Forth Games. There's a couple of videos up about that and my progress on that. Along with that, I've been buying recently artifacts and things that go into the museum, which I've done a video about. And I actually have some of the stuff over here on my desk, and I'll show those in a minute. Also started working on some medieval knights to do a jousting game. So I picked up a couple of sets of rules for that, along with where to go. So I also picked up this too because I want to do some Western.
Oh,
Slingers Paradise.
I never heard of that one before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's God's Eyes Game is the publishing company, and really, I actually saw this on. Is it Rust? No. God, I can't think of which podcast I saw this.
It's okay. We all. It's
I can't remember.
It's a big show. Sometimes people get nervous but
yeah,
it's.
I can't remember. But anyway, so the author was actually on here. Was on there talking about it. So I kind of liked the mechanics that he was talking about. So I thought I'd pick it up and read it. I also picked up recently this.
Oh, cool.
Try to get myself in the center of the camera here.
Oh, neat.
I was going to do like a little unboxing and just kind of flip through this, but with the number of YouTube channels that I follow, there are so many unboxings of this. I'm like, okay, there's nothing I can add to this. So this is actually, again, I've heard and read good things about this. So I'm looking forward to trying this one out with my medieval armies.
So that's the first time I've seen that.
Me too.
Oh, okay. Where did
a unboxing would actually have new eyes on it. So
all right. Well, then maybe I'll do it. Where did I put the other? Oh, there it is. Got too much stuff and not enough places to go with it. So this is the jousting set of rules that I was going to try.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And again, same company as the Gunfighters. Okay, God's Eye Games. And again, the rules are fairly short. And let's find the so there's about, I don't know, 40 pages worth of rules or so. Right? And the rest of it is just, different skill sets, things like that. So I'm looking forward to trying this. I'm actually going to try this with the family.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be neat.
See how they like it.
So you probably you could make a really cool jousting strip, I'm sure. Like, because you're not actually having to make an entire board unless you're going to like make the stands and like, the stuff that you want to do for extra. But I could imagine that you could put a lot of effort in just to a really cool jousting strip, right? Yeah. That'd be kind of cool.
As a matter of fact, I picked these up from Sally Forth.
Oh, sweet.
Little tilting.
Yeah. That's a tilt.
Yep. So
cool.
I just primed these today, so I just got to start painting them. Let's see what else we got here. Started painting up horses. These are from Essex Miniatures. My latest YouTube update, I had talked about these, showed these off in bare metal, so now we're actually starting to get some paint on them. Let's see what else we got here.
Got a lot going on.
Yeah, well, I like variety. So this is the large scale figure that I just completed.
Nice.
It's called Ronin. Yep.
Let me. There we go.
There we are. It's called the Ronin. It's by Raining Frogs Models, which is in Italy. The 1/9 scale bust. And this was painted completely with oils.
Nice.
So there's just some of the stuff that I've had going on in the recent weeks.
Yeah, that's lots of cool stuff. If you don't mind, I was just going to ask you, do you mind just saying really quick, I don't have the miniatures and I've in some ways used an excuse not to get them, but I've been interested in doing like an Old West or a Wild West sort of game for a very long time. But I'll be honest, I found a reason every single time not to get a certain rule set. Like when I've actually looked at it or either online or looked into it, I found a reason. I've always said, well, this is just not the one for me. And I've just basically said that for everyone that's come through. And so when I see one that I've never heard of before, I'm just kind of curious if you were to highlight like skirmish versus larger units or how activations work, like what would you say, or even actually how preset like your gangs are, you know, if it is an Old West versus how much is from the ground up that you build them out individually. Like, how would you characterize that game if you were to describe it? Like
the new one, the Gunslinger's Paradise.
Yeah. Or do you not know enough about? Have you had a chance to look into it enough to be able to answer that? Or?
I have kind of flipped through it. It does use a card activation system. Okay. It also allows you to have like small groups. Okay. So I think it's kind of like 4 or 5 is like the group that you can control. And essentially the reason why I picked this rule set up was because I actually directly asked the author about doing a specific scenario, which was I want to do the last gunfight for the Magnificent Seven. Okay, so it's fairly large, right? Lots of Mexican town folk in there, plus the 7, plus all the bandits, right? And he said a little bit on he said the only thing you would have to tweak is just the activation part. He said, but the rules itself can handle a large game. Where in the past, some of the other games that I've tried, like Fistful of Lead and I can't think of it. It was one of the Osprey ones, and I can't think of what it is now. Anyway, they did okay, but it started to kind of fall apart after a little bit. But I haven't really dove into these rules yet. In fact, my friend Sean and I are going to actually do a game in November, so I got a little time to brush up on the rules and try to figure them out. So I've got a little time. He's got all the figures now. I'm just going to read the rules and go to his place and run it.
Oh, that's cool.
What happens.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it after you've given it a stroll.
Yeah. So I was talking about the museum. So I picked up, so every museum's got an office, right? So I found a roll top desk.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
So
yeah,
this came from the Miniature Building Authority.
Oh, right.
And you'll see on my latest video, there's some figures and stuff that I picked up off of Etsy. And there's a gentleman there who sculpted and printed these marble-like statues. And essentially he was using them for like D&D, but they fit well enough into, 28 millimeter normal pulp fiction kind of, or pulp action kind of games that that's what I'm decided to use them for. And I'm not even going to paint them. They already look like a marble statue, so they're almost ready, set to go.
Neat. That's great. Lots of cool stuff going on. How about you, Rusty? What have you been up to recently?
Oh, a lot of just kind of organizing stuff. I've been working on, you've seen a little bit of Warhammer fantasy stuff coming across the channel here lately. And I finished that one project, the American Civil War, those 28, those old glory ones. I finished those, and I finished up my War Axe for my Mechanicum army. That, I think I had them in the last video, 2 weeks ago. And since then, all my free time has been going through all my fantasy stuff and cataloging it, organizing it, and that kind of stuff. Just trying to, like, what do I need to do? Maybe announce that there's a Warhammer painting challenge going on.
Old Hammer at one point.
Yeah. So I got some stuff I'm going to start. I've been holding off. They're sitting on the desk. They showed up. It's like, if you watched the announcement for the video, they were there. They're just like, time to wait for the announcement. I want to dig into them. So
we'll just shout out. So not only have Jank Master who's joined, but also Curtis has joined us. Thanks for stopping in, Curtis. Always a pleasure.
Hey, Curtis.
And, and then Rusty's playing with his winged bat creature. There we go.
I put my first couple layers of paint on my Bull Taurs.
Yeah. Now, is that a Forge World model, or is that not?
This is Forge World.
Because you see, I don't have a whole lot of knowledge of the intricacies of the Chaos Dwarf army, and when you were showing me, when you were showing me, but when you were showing on your YouTube channel your stuff, like I wasn't that familiar with the Bull Centaurs and the Bull and a lot of that stuff. And when I was looking at that model, it looked so intricate. I was thinking, I wonder if that was one of the ones you got from Forge World.
Yes. That was one of the wonderful things is when you go to like Gen Con, Games Workshop actually has this, in Forge World, they have their booth.
Mm-hmm.
So, long as supplies last, you could buy stuff. And I was like, what do you got for Chaos Dwarves? And they go, well, this is our right here. It's like, I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll take that. And what else you got? Well, that's all we got left. All right. I'll take that. So that's kind of like how I get a lot of stuff. And it saves a little bit on shipping too, and time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The amount of time, because I've ordered stuff from Games Workshop before, and it's taken a month or more to get across the pond. And it's like, okay, it just takes the amount of time for me to drive home, 8 hours. So that's
that instant gratification of being able to just pull it off there and
nice.
It's nice. Yeah, that's nice. Having to wait for it coming across the ocean is sometimes a little discouraging.
So what do you feel that way now, especially got all this stuff that's supposedly coming in from Kickstarters and things like that, and stuck overseas.
Yeah, like right now we're waiting on. I think we talked about it last 2 weeks ago. I have the BattleTech stuff supposed to come in for the Kickstarter, and I turned down a Kickstarter yesterday that ended for some board games, and I was like, I really wanted them, but I was like, I was having conversation, us not having the fair, that was a chunk of change lost this year, and I was like, I make some big purchases in August and September because I have some spare change laying around. And it's like, I was about ready to go, no, I don't have any money spare laying around, so I can't do that. So
yeah.
It's like, that's the nature of the beast.
So
we got some, what am I drinking tonight?
That's your musty drink?
My musty drink. I'm getting thirsty. I got my 100 rye. I think I showed you this before. I sent you a picture of it. Canadian rye whiskey.
Nice. I don't think I've seen it on the show yet, though.
Nope, this is the first time. It's a little low.
You've sampled it once or twice.
Yeah. but not low enough to go into panic mode.
No, it's low enough that I might buy another bottle of it tomorrow. So when I go grocery shopping.
Well,
so that is the extent of what's going around here. Not a lot of hobby stuff other than just organizing everything. That's the extent of that. And maybe after tomorrow, we'll get into that discussion. Start working on the next project. And I see Iron Man's popping his head up there.
Yeah, my camera's decided does this every once in a while, but
it's clobbering time.
I think it needs to be restarted here. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, no, I just showed this today. I haven't been doing a whole lot lately. Admittedly, I need to actually step up my hobby and game, but that was my Iron Man, and I was happy despite me not doing much lately. I was happy with the way he came out. It's popping. He'll pop on the cartoon table quite nice, and it's been fun to switch gears a little bit with the cartoon stuff. And then I actually have Ben Grimm, the Thing, that I'm going to be doing after him. And I was telling Rusty before the show, we're showing stuff that we purchased. This is a game that I might be able to play with my kids, but didn't buy it to play the game. But because I've been doing all this comic book style painting lately to try to just paint a little differently, I picked this up because it was on sale and it was kind of cheap. And it's actually a board game that has the comic book characters, but they're in that chibi sort of style. So they're kind of really cartoonish. It's just a board game. So this is like Ultron. We've got Red Skull, Captain America. Just as a comparison, like we've got Iron Man here. And so I actually don't even really have any plans on painting this anytime soon. But I actually purchased it just because it was on sale. And I thought, oh, you know, I could practice my, for the price of this game, it would cost me as much to get 1 or 2 of these miniatures for the whole game. And I got like 14 miniatures of this size. And that's the Wasp. And I just thought it'd be really cool to hone my skills a bit, you know, just to do all that. And, you know, since Rob's on the show, I'll put this one in here because he's a big fan of the Hulk. But, yeah, got the Hulk as well. And so, and actually you are too, Victor. You actually painted a number of Hulks. Yep. I don't know if I put this one out yet, but he's one of my favorites is the Ant-Man sculpt. He's on like a coin.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah, so I actually just picked this up, like I said, because it was pretty cheap, and it was like, this will be a good way to practice when I don't have miniatures that are cartoon to paint. I can just paint these guys up, and it'll be really nice to do a bit more of that cartoon style painting. But yeah, that's it. I've been rolling around in my head what I'm going to do next. I have to finish a couple of these Marvel characters, but then I'm going to we're going to, you know, be looking at doing some old hammer painting in the future, and I'm looking really at getting back into doing some of my French Indian War. I've got a lot to paint for French Indian War still, and I'm looking forward to doing that. And besides that, of course, I may not be painting as much, but it doesn't slow me down on bringing my Musty drink with me today. So I actually have Aberlure with me today, and like you know, mine's actually been sampled a couple of times. Yeah, just a little bit. And yeah, that's about it for me. And so
looks like I have to go downstairs and go get mine now.
You're starting to feel a little lonely here.
We'll take a few seconds for you to get your drink.
I've got my water.
That's vodka.
Right, that's what it is. Yes, it's
vodka. Yeah.
That's right. We'll stick with that. So it looks like we also, before we get into the topics tonight, it looks like we do have a bunch of comments. I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, just like rip through these comments before we get going here. Here's a question going for you, Vic, I think. Where would you rate the old Games Workshop historical Old West game?
You know, I'd never played it. So
yeah,
nope. Matter of fact, I didn't even know they did one. I had done some historical stuff, but
you have to go way back.
Yeah. Yeah, had no idea that they had done one. So can't rate it. Sorry.
Yeah, it was Legends of the Old West. And then we got Curtis came in the house. I think we announced him earlier. And he's asking, what are the topics? Topics? Do we have topics tonight?
So, well, one of them I think Curtis mentioned down earlier is what to do with the rules when you remake a classic game. Years go by, and then all of a sudden things change in the world, things change in gaming, things change in the way you develop games, the materials, the sculpting, and everything. But then all of a sudden, what do you do with the rules? Should you evolve the rules, or should you stay true to the classic rules? And so that's like, or anything else in between. That's one of the topics. The other topic is painting as a purpose, like getting the units on the table for a purpose to play the game, and painting also potentially for display or for even art, and how, and everything in between, and just a discussion on that. So those are our two topics tonight that we'll be getting into.
That's the exact one I was talking about, Curtis. War and Peace one. You add the shipping on board, and it was like $110 after shipping. I was like, no, okay. Wife would have me like, strung up. Okay, what we got? Then we got the little Iron Man and the big Iron Man.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. I don't know that I've seen Jesse on the show before. Maybe we do.
Hey, Jesse's in the house. All right.
Hi, Jesse.
Contrast paints. Them heresy. Yeah, Jesse's one of the guys that I play with. He's a local.
Cool.
Very nice.
Yeah, I have never used contrast paints. I wouldn't mind trying them one day just to use them. A lot of people really talk about them and like them, but I've never tried them before.
Jesse and I tried them. We went over to the Games Workshop store when they first came out. We sat down and we played with them for a day. Mm-hmm. They work pretty good. If it's something that's really quick, easy, and if you are into mixing them and actually know a little bit about how to paint, you can actually make some good stuff out of it.
Cool.
So it's not like a bottle of cheat per se. It's individuals that don't have a lot of skill can use them and actually turn something, quickly into something that's painted. It's not like you have to thin your paints or anything. You just like put it on there and call it good. Then once it's dry, then you can darken it or lighten it, put in the shading and stuff if you want to.
Cool.
Okay, the core is similar to Lotor, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So that's only Old West game that I've tried. So I think he's talking about the Legends of the Old West.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It actually looked interesting. I saw some, I think on Griddle Miniature Games, some bat reps of Legends of the Old West, and they were really good, like that. Well done.
Well, I think we've caught up with all the comments.
All right. Well, shall we? It sounds we're already starting to move into the topic, and that was going to be the first one anyway. So maybe you guys can take this anywhere you want, because it could be there could be a lot of issues with remaking classic games, and I'm thinking we can think board games as well as miniature games. But we have you'd mentioned a game just now, but the game that came to my mind is everybody's talking about Hero Quest right now. A lot of people are talking about Hero Quest, the old game, being remade and on Kickstarter. And there's actually a lot of hate videos too. I've noticed that. And I'm not up on it. I'm not buying it. I didn't play the original. But it still made me think when it comes to the rules in particular. And you could even talk about the imagery and things like that too, how you change that. But I was wondering about the rules, because as time goes on, people's tastes change a little bit for some people, and how they like to play games, and games go certain different ways. Like we know in tabletop gaming, we see a lot more skirmish games these days than perhaps 30 years ago. Like there's been, or at least been they've become very popular, lower figure count kind of games. And the question is, do you adapt? Like even all the new in-game mechanics, all the new kinds of mechanics that have come out over the years that people then kind of enjoy. In some cases more than the old mechanics, and in some cases it's nor here nor there. Do you evolve the game? Because then the people that were like the game originally, you run the risk of alienating, but then some of those people are going to evolve that played the game originally, and then you have the new players that are used to playing different types of games. So what is the right way to go with that? And then the only other thing I'd throw out there is just we can talk about different ones. Like I've got a list here that I was kind of thinking about, but so I don't know. Maybe as is typical and traditional, we usually always put the guest in the hot seat first.
Okay. I actually have an opinion about this, because there have been recently several, at least board games that I used to play that have come out as new games. One of them was Guns of August, which Rusty did a whole series on.
Took me a month.
Yeah, and then it came out from not Legion. I can't think of the name of the game company.
Compass.
Compass, that was it. And they re-released it. And my understanding with some of the history is they went back and they looked at some of the errata that not only the old Avalon Hill did, but they also took stuff from some of the chats and things like that people said, oh, well, here, try this, do this, and kind of incorporated that and then added some other stuff to it. So when, again, watching Rusty's series that he did on that one, it played very differently.
Yeah, it was totally different.
Yeah, and I actually liked it better than I liked the original Guns of August. I thought it actually gave it a little bit more flavor.
Cool.
So I thought in that case it worked really well. The other one that I used to play, I played a lot, was We the People, which was by Avalon Hill, so American Revolution, and GMT re-released it as Washington's War.
Okay.
Sorry, I was looking at it. There's you can't see it, but I've got a wall full of board games over there, and I was looking for it.
You're doing what Rusty does all the time on the show. He's always looking behind this stuff.
I'm old. I can't remember anything. But when I played that one, I had a hard time getting into it, and I can't really explain why. I don't know if I was still remembering, because when I was playing it, I was living in Las Vegas, and there was another guy and I. We used to get together like, I don't know, every Friday morning or something like that, because we both work nights, so we'd get out of work and go play for a few hours. Well, he used to go and compete at the Avalon Hill board gaming convention that they would hold in Maryland every year. And he actually won a few years in a row playing We the People. And I don't know if I just remembered, what he and I would discuss and use and play while doing that game, that I couldn't quite get to work in the other one. So again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine the way it is. I just didn't remember it being the same thing anymore, if that makes sense.
You get a slightly different flavor that comes across.
Yeah.
It's like you're brought up the Guns of August, because I picked up the Compass game, the Empires and Alliances, and I was like, okay, I want to play the Guns of August first again, just before I do the other one, just to see if there's any really difference between them. And it's like, oh, there's the old version, and then there's the new version. And they did bring out they had the fan stuff that went into, a lot of the designer notes that went into the newest one that came out. And there was, seemed like there's less restrictions in the older version. And it seemed to be play a little easier. And then there was a lot more finessing that had to be done and thinking in the newer version, because the way they set it up, it's like they made it theaters instead of just a big war where armies could march over here and march over there. It's like, no, you're restricted to your theater of operation, because if you're a third world country, you're not going to go far past your, they kind of, I think how they made it was your supply lines would only go so far. You couldn't have your army march out so far, because then they'd be tired, you'd run out of supply and everything.
One of the other things that I thought that they did well with that was that they also restricted like where the armies could be on the Western Front if you're starting, right? So they would lock you into, hey, the French armies only protected this part, and they never went above, Liege or, anything else, or the British never went any farther south than that, so they really restricted where you could go, where in the Guns of August, you could go anywhere.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, you could go, and you could send your, the big difference was like on Eastern Front, and I had like Bulgaria, Romania decided to join the Central Powers, and they could march all the way to Moscow if they wanted to. They didn't have to worry about supply lines, of pretty much, as long as they stayed with them on the rail lines. But when you look at it in the new one, it's like you can only go out to 7 hexes beyond the frontier. This is the frontier. That's where the frontier ended. You can go only 7 hexes beyond that. It's like, it's basically stop, and then the Russians just go, what you got to do? You're not coming any closer. And that's how the Russians end up winning the war, was that they couldn't go any farther. It's like the end result is that all right, all we have to do is just wait out the Germans long enough, and then pretty soon it's just like, there she goes. It was going all downhill quickly. So that is a great example of new versus old, how they redesign things that make you even get out of your mindset how you played the game. If you played it
Curtis
before.
says
If
you
you
need to
never
mention,
played it before, different.
Curtis says you need to mention Spider-Man. Plumber looks bored. I'm just kidding.
Hey, Palmer. Battletech.
There we go. Oh, gosh. we have a Battletech drinking game going on.
Oh, sorry. I forgot. There's a moment to drink. Hold on. Okay.
So, Rusty.
My cue. Sorry.
What are your thoughts on it? I know you started talking already, but do you have any particular other games that come to mind when you think about this topic?
We started up on the, you said there's a lot of discussion going on with the new Hero Quest. And I was like, oh, they're remaking Hero Quest? So the first thing I did is I looked it up and I was like, okay, yeah. It's like, this used to be a $30 game and not anymore. Times 5. And I was like, it's like Hero Quest was like an intro game. It's like got you in, just like the kind of like have miniatures and playing game. Now it's a $150 game plus $30 in shipping. I'm like, I don't think so. And they said they're taking aspects of the old rules and adding some new stuff to it. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure if that's the direction, totally redesign it or just remake the new one to old, or I don't know.
So speaking of that, when they're talking about maybe doing redesigning the rules, I mean, I guess the different types of games can make a difference, but whether it's a board game where it's sort of a fairly restricted pattern, that you're going through, in your choices, or whether it's like a tabletop game, that's maybe a little less clean, like as far as what you can do. You can get a bit more scrappy, let's say, in your movement and everything. Like, how do you think they should? It's probably not a good across the board answer, but how do you think they should approach things? Like, do you think it changes a lot depending on the game? Do you think they should be like looking to make advancements over time as a general theory? Do you think when they re-release a game and they call it that game, they should just stay exactly the way it was?
Well, I don't know how Vic feels about this, but there's something to be said about nostalgia, and then there's something to be said about advancing it and fixing problems that were in something before. I don't have no problem. It's like you see a game, it's like that's an obvious problem, that has to be fixed. And we've had games where a good example is the War and Peace. It's just got kickstarted. They had two options. You can buy the full game for like $90 or plus shipping. And then, or you could buy an upgrade kit for like $30, $40, which would fix some of the errors and stuff that they had in the previous editions. And I'm like looking at that and I was like, they're getting onto something right there where they recognize like, yeah, we had some problems and we're going to change some certain things to make it work better. And then instead of having to force you to buy the whole new game, we're going to just go, here you go. You can upgrade it and march on. And I had no problem with that. It's when you take the whole mentality of throwing the baby out with the bathwater type mentality, what that 800-pound gorilla company across the pond does every 2 years. There's where you have some issues with something in certain aspects of it. But what do you think, Vic?
No, I think you're right. Somebody who may have had, let's say you go back to the Guns of August example. What if somebody had done that as a Kickstarter? But, like I have my copy and have had it since the 80s.
81, I think it was.
Yeah. So, I probably didn't buy it then. I probably bought it a few years later. But, so unless there was something very significant, like, you know, they really upgraded, you know, the graphics and all that kind of stuff, then I might buy the new map and the new counters. But yeah, if I already own it and you're going to supply me with just an updated version of the rules and maybe some new counters to deal with some of the new things, then I'll probably just buy that. And I think that's a perfect way to do it, and a perfect way to keep people interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're going to lay out a whole lot of money. You know, in a certain regard, I think when they did Advanced Squad Leader, so every time that they came out with, you know, a new module, right, they just gave you what you needed for that, right? You already had the rule book.
Open the binder up and
right.
So it goes in.
You know, I was kind of hoping PDF rule sets would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, where, you know, let's say you buy a PDF from someone, right? You publish it, and then suddenly they come out with the second edition. Well, the only option right now is to buy the second edition, right? But if they say, hey, we'll either give you or sell you at a reduced price the changes, and you just put it into, because you can merge PDF files, just merge it, right? And you still have that same system, just the newer tweaks, or, you know, whatever they've come up with over the last couple of years, whenever they do that. You know, I think we're kind of missing some technology that we can use to do some of that stuff too. Hey, Mini Warmut, how are you?
We've got some sophistication tonight with Victor joining us.
Remember,
you know,
Palma? Remember,
you know, it's funny. I struggle a little bit with this topic, and part of it is because I actually have a huge gap in my gaming lifespan. Like, I actually stopped probably from 18 to, I'm going to say 32 or something. I mean, like, I just had a huge period of time where I didn't game. And so a lot of the games, when I made a list here, like, a lot of the games that come to mind are by observation, like things like Blood Bowl, Ogre with Steve Jackson, which I'm going to talk about in a second, Battletech, definitely Battletech actually comes to mind. Kill Team.
He's self
medicating.
Right?
You know, Kill Team with GW, Hero Quest came up, and Space Hulk. A lot of these are GW games, but all these come to mind. I wasn't always playing the original, and so I maybe see, in looking back at the original, like maybe what they've changed. My observation, and whether it's right or wrong, is that a lot of times with some of these board games that were very elegant in their simplicity, like Ogre, to me, is sort of one of the things that makes it really popular, I think, is its sort of elegance and its simplicity, and in some of the ways, like, I played it and I really enjoyed it, but it's not the most complex game to figure out. When I saw some of the original game, like, you can even get them in a little plastic bag with counters and a sheet of paper, and it's really fairly simple. But then I also played the sort of, I don't know if it's called the deluxe edition, but the huge box that they released in the last few years, where they had all the miniatures and all the really great quality materials, like the board and everything. And but it's still basically, the essence is the same. You know, the game's essentially the same. And in that case, they're tapping into something that's nostalgia, like you said, Rusty. But then they're not inherently changing the game from what people liked about it, you know, in the very beginning. Like, they're adding cool miniatures instead of counters, and everything's a bit bigger. But you're basically almost selling that nostalgia in a lot of ways, which seems to work in that case. Like, they're not necessarily saying, well, these are mechanics we've needed to add over the years for the most part, and we're going to change it considerably. Is that the right way to go? I mean, it's just for them, they chose that way, and it seemed to be successful. Space Hulk is another example with GW. It seems like it's, for what people like about it, it sort of works in its original sort of essence. Like, they haven't added new mechanics that are going to rebalance the sides between the Marines and the Tyranids. Basically, you have your small group of Marines that are defending themselves against the Horde coming in, and their mechanics have worked. they upgrade the miniatures and the actual board and everything, and they re-release occasionally, but it's not a total revamp of the game. And it seems to work. It's like a classic Warhammer type game, board game. I'm glad that you guys mentioned some examples where they decided to really change the game, because I was thinking, and just in my experience, I couldn't think of too many examples where they actually changed the game, and then in this case for the better. I was really surprised that you said that, Victor, because most of the time on our show we're kind of like, oh, I don't like all these changes, and so the fact that you were like, I actually kind of liked it better. I mean, that was kind of good. It was refreshing. But one thing I did, like, if you get to miniature games and you go away from the board game phenomena, as like if you think about Kill Team for Warhammer, I was never that crazy about Kill Team to begin with. Like, I've liked some of the fan base ones better. But having said that, they change. It seems like they change it considerably with the rules with each release, and I do wonder if the more you have going on and the less structure, and in some cases the less elegance to it, sometimes it almost requires more update as time goes on to re-release it, to try out new tabletop rules and things like that. Because it seems like in those games, skirmish games, when they re-release them, tabletop skirmish, they tend to change them pretty considerably in my experience. And I just am talking about things like Kill Team, Battletech, on the other hand, which a lot of people call a board game, they, instead of actually changing the classic game, and Rusty, you'll verify this, they actually decided in one case to offer Alpha Strike, right? Which is not, it's Battletech, but it's basically allowing you to play a little differently. So they just took that and they just offered another sort of way to use your miniatures and way to play it, and in some ways catering to a different group of people without throwing out the classic game. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting.
Quick and simple.
Yeah, but they if you liked Battletech like back in the day, you could play classic Battletech today and still pretty much feel like you're playing the same game.
Yeah. Vic brought something up that
the cat brought a cat up.
Yeah. Wait, how do you been?
He's got an opinion on this. He or she.
She. This is Muffin. She was in my last video for a second. I don't know. She made an appearance. She jumped up on the table.
Cool.
I see a putty tat.
Yeah.
You get companies, you have those downloading services where they have all those games that, sell everything as a PDF.
Yeah, the Wargame Vault is one of them.
Yeah, that's one I was trying to remember the name of it. I have us buy games every once in a while off of that. And there's some companies that will, we came up with a newer edition or something that's been upgraded, and they just you get it free. Right. You already paid for it, so they just automatically update the stuff for you for free.
Yep. Yeah. I actually haven't played it in a long time because I kind of gave up on Modern Warfare stuff. But there was a game called the Bear and the Eagle or something like that, and bought the original edition of the PDF, and then like every 6 months they send out a new update. Hey, we tweaked this based on what people have said, and so we did this. So here you go. Here's a new version of it. I now have like 6 or 7 versions of it. Mm-hmm. Since I haven't been playing them, I stopped downloading them. But it's a great way to do that, I think.
Mm-hmm. It gives you a living rule set, mm-hmm. basically, as you're seeing it transition. It's like the everybody out there that has it is the play testers, and it's like, have you tried doing this? And it's like, I've never thought about doing that before. As somebody that has written rules myself, somebody comes up with an idea and you go, I didn't think about that. That's a great idea.
Right.
You say how I can work that in.
We're talking about tabletop gaming. One rule set that kind of sticks in my mind, and it's kind of a famous one, is when WRG went from 5th to 6th edition and then came out with Warrior, the ancient medieval set of rules. I think they were going for the advanced squad leader version of ancient rules or something, because it suddenly, at least in my mind, became unplayable.
Yeah.
It was just so overblown. And I actually, this was several years ago, the first time I had ever gone to Historicon, I met the guys who wrote the rules, and I actually played in the game with them. And, you know, and it's because they knew it, the game played well.
Yeah.
Well, when I bought the rules and brought it home, couldn't get it to run the same way. You know, and it took, and there wasn't just me, there was like 3 or 4 of us I said, hey, you know, had a great time with this, you know, whatever. And after about 6 or 7 times, we went, you know, because, you know, some of the older guys in the group had played WRG Ancients. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know, we'll go on to the next one. And that didn't work.
That's the interesting thing is if you ever go to these conventions, you actually get to play the games with the guys that design the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Things go a lot easier and make sense. You know.
Yeah, and you can ask questions too.
Yeah.
You know.
That's the thing is like you get people, you go and it's like, well, what do you mean by this rule or this? Like, oh, this is like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. It's like, okay, it makes sense to me, I guess, but you know, somebody reading it may not make sense to them.
It could be viewed as a tangent on the discussion, but I think you guys kind of brought up a point, though, because one of the things that's changed over time is the amount of stuff that you have at your disposal to play. Like, you know, in the last 30 years, right? I mean, like, there probably are more games now. I mean, most people will say, and it might not, I know historical's been around for a long time, historical tabletop games, historical games, but there was a time when people would say, well, my 2 options were Warhammer or D&D, like in the early 80s. Like I didn't know of like too many other options out there. But today, I mean, there are a lot of big companies, let alone little companies, you know, you add it all together. And so it maybe when you're making a set of rules, that's the thing that Rusty and I sometimes have complained about, that sometimes you have a game that's a bit clunkier, but we kind of liked it that way. But then all of a sudden you're trying to bring in like new people that actually have lots of other distractions besides this game, and you need to make it playable, right? Like you need to make it playable as if it's not the only thing you play.
Right.
And so that could be a consideration too, I suppose.
Yeah. I was just trying to think of, there's another rule set that we had tried. Oh, the 1870 rules. Very, very detailed. God, for the life of me right now, I can't think of the guy's name. In fact, I actually played a few years that I went to Historicon kind of back to back. He'd run a game. His terrain is beautiful. He does everything in 6mm. But I really love you know, he came out a rule set for 1859, which deals with the Italian War of Independence. And that's a period I love. And I played a game at Historicon with that, and I had a great time. And then I bought the rule set from him right then and there. I got it home. I started reading through it, and it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't put it together, you know, but when I was playing it there, it was perfect. It ran, you know, and, you know, you could ask questions, you have the answers, whatever. And I do think now technology has made it much easier to shoot somebody an email and go, what do you mean by paragraph, whatever. Oh, yeah, okay, that's a typo. Change that, you know, do stuff like that.
Yeah.
I do think the resources out there now are much easier to get an answer, get things going, you know, do all that kind of stuff so that you can find an answer faster. Maybe you can hold on to a set of rules that may be a little bit more clunky because you can get a direct answer. I think one of the first times I played a miniature rule set, somebody gave me Napoleon's Battles from Avalon Hill. And I know people love that system. I tried to read the rules. I fell asleep through it. I couldn't read them. I just couldn't get through it. And when games, you know, like I couldn't really grasp them, you know, but people loved it, you know.
Yeah, I was an individual that played a lot of Napoleon's Battles from Avalon Hill. And that was my intro to basically miniature wargaming. Is that we had a large group of guys that played it here in the area because we had our own club and everything. And they would set games up, and that's how I got into Napoleonics 15 mil. Was that was the rules that they use. And when you have guys that played it nonstop, that they'd play 2-3 games a week, and you when you first joined up, it's like, I'm having a little hard time on it. It's like, well, that's what this means. This is like, don't worry about it. Just throw in here. And eventually it's like, it got to the point where you never even stopped. You never read the rules anymore because the guys there that played knew enough that he's like, yeah, you need to roll this or you need to roll that. It's like, okay, I don't even, okay. It's just, you're on autopilot by that time.
Yeah.
So
I can pretty much do the same thing with the PK sets of rules. I know I've talked about them before.
Yeah.
I really love the system. I know there are people out there who hate it and everything else, but we got to the point where my gaming group, we played it so much we didn't have to even look at the rule set anymore.
Yeah.
And we already knew what to roll. We knew how to take care of it. And having played it enough times, you finally get the nuances of the rule set, and you really find out that, hey, okay, this really does work the way they planned it to work.
Yeah.
You can trump somebody. You can, do whatever it is you think you want to do. You figure that out. But it does take, I don't know how many games it took us before we finally crossed that hill,
Mm-hmm. So then that's interesting because just kind of trying to stay on topic here, as you guys are kind of going down memory lane with all these rules, I'm thinking like it oftentimes is the case where people get really kind of upset when the rules change from their favorite game, and that just seems to be over and over again what I typically hear. And in the way you're talking about some of your favorite rules, like PK, like you're talking about, I would imagine that down the road, if they sort of changed it and they drastically changed it from what it was before, there's a chance upon initial inspection, you might be a little turned off because you really like the game. Like that was the game you liked. However, based on what you guys said before that, you're also making me think that if you already have the original game and nobody can take that away from you,
right,
that if you were to buy it in the future, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing if they actually made some changes because it's a different game and you might just see something different, Yeah. And so it seems like there is, as I maybe suspected, there is no hard and fast rule as to whether they should change the rules or not. Like in some cases, it seems like it makes sense to stay true to what the brand is of that thing they're re-releasing as a nostalgic way to improve it and reissue it and, give everybody new components that are better and all of that stuff. But then in some cases, it seems like either whether it be to fix problems or whether it be to offer something new, to people that already have it, it makes sense maybe to change it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I was just catching up with Curtis's comments there.
Yeah, we're talking about the Napoleon battles, the old Avalon Hill versus the new one. I remember they came out with a new edition of it. I just couldn't remember if they changed the name of it or kept it the same.
I didn't even know they came out with a new edition of it. Tells you how far away I am away from it. I guess, what? For people who've played DBA, right, the original DBA to what are they up to, DBA 3.0 or whatever it is now? First of all, getting past the Barker ease of the original set, do you guys have an opinion on, those 3 iterations? Because it went from DBA to 2.0 to 3.0, I think. And I know people out there love the DBA system, and I only played the original version a couple of times, and it was enjoyable. But I had somebody coaching us through it. So do you guys have an opinion on that one? Because I understand that's changed drastically from its original thing.
Yeah, Palmer, you played the newest version.
Yeah, I was introduced to it in did they call it 2.5? Did they go to 2.0 to 2.5 or something like that? I think
I can't
there was
remember.
something like in between, but I played the version right before 3.0. But I was just recently taught the game by a friend and just sat down to play it. And I don't have a good reference point as to what the changes were, although I believe that the table size itself has actually changed in recent years. Like it used to be, I think, a little wider, and then now it's actually just like more of a square board. But they've changed the dimension a little bit. My only reference point really with it is, the folks that I'd sort of been introduced to it were happy with the new rules. Like they didn't really have any major concerns with it. My impression is that the spirit and the feel of the game was still there, and that they still felt like they were playing DBA. I know that sometimes, whether it be to set up the game or the boards and things like that, people get set up and ready they have all their stuff to play the game, and then they change the rules, and now you gotta, like the folks I play with will actually take like a board and literally cover it with grass or felt, like kind of, and make it actually to play, like make their table and things like that. And they had to change it, for the newer one. But beyond that, it seemed like it was still in the spirit of the original game. And they didn't have any real issues with it. However, having said that, I have heard people have had, some folks that just didn't like the changes. And so you're going to get that all the time, I think, that just, of course, people are going to, in some cases, prefer the older version. So,
yeah, it's like you always have that transition where, there's been some games that have gone on, you get newer editions, like, say Battletech, for example. There is a distinction between the old version and the new version, but some of the things have changed other than that they've added a ton of new rules to it. It's like the old rule book was like yay thick, and then now you got a stack of rules. It's like the old Starfleet battles, the original rules versus the captain's rules, where you got a big stack, or the squad leader. You used to have a small amount of rules, and then you got the 15-foot thick binder to play. And you have to have Data's brain implant to put in to be able to play.
Mm-hmm.
But there is good things about transitioning to newer set. It's like, obviously, if you keep the intent there, and what the total vision is, like, let's say you have version 1 versus version 2, and like, all right, it's 90% of what version 1 used to be, but now I'm taking a little bit. It's like, I found that there's some problems with the first edition. I'm tweaking them enough to streamline it enough to make it work, and I'm adding some advanced rules to it to make some other individuals happy that want it. That to me is a natural transition. But when you take something that's like going from A to D, when you like, where did B and C go? Oh, I threw all that out. It doesn't matter anymore. This is a newer version. And then you're just totally alienated. You're just like, okay, we're not advancing anymore. We're going to continue playing A. And you got your little core group of people that continue to play until they die. Like, some of us that are looking at the Warhammer Fantasy. As you look at it, it's like, well, I'm not an Age of Sigmar guy by any means. I've tried playing. I'm not really a big fan of it. I'm just like, I'm nostalgia, man. I'm going back to the old Warhammer days, obviously, because that's what seemed to work. So there's your two different versions, where something works and something doesn't seem to work.
So I don't have a whole lot of experience with the GW sets of rules, because it's really not something that ever really interested me. So, but I know I've heard people complain enough about it where, they'll come out with, and I'm going to get my terminology wrong on this, but, like you have your core set of rules, and then suddenly they come out with a codex, and then it changed whatever was in the core set. So in people, sitting in the local game shop, you could hear people getting pissed off that there was a new codex. because it would completely change everything that they had. Now suddenly, not only could they, I guess, not use the miniatures they had, they'd have to go buy new miniatures to fit whatever that. See, that kind of stuff pisses me off.
Yeah.
If you're going to write a set of rules that's going to force you to go out and buy something completely new again, I'm not touching it. And I think, to a certain extent, I think Flames of War kind of does that same thing, and I can't stand that. I can't stand that set of rules at all. I know people.
They sort of did the same thing to War Machine and Hordes. If you've seen that around too, is that they changed the rules up, forcing people to get out of their comfort zone and force you to start buying different stuff, because people were buying what works the best and totally ignoring. So that's the same way Games Workshop at work, was that what was the best stuff that was in that codex or army book, the next army book or codex that came out, they flipped the script or added new stuff that forced, like you said, force you to go buy stuff. And you get individuals like, oh, I'm not buying. I already forked out $300, $400, $500 for this game. I'm not putting any more money out into it.
Yep.
It's like, I'm not going any farther.
One of the advantages of fictional gaming is that you can create new things that not only, you incorporate into the rules, but then that people will then buy, you'll make more money on. And I guess in historicals, like they offer like, U.S. Army, like one season, and then they'll offer like winter clothes, like so you can buy more miniatures, right? Yeah. And also people get to paint them up, but it's not like creating a new type of dragon, right? Like some sort of, it's not like a hippogriff or like some sort of new creature that you put on the table that now has rules that you add to your army. And so in some ways it's a nice business model that you could just create stuff out of thin air, but then also it forces people to buy stuff, as you were saying. Have you guys ever seen an example of rebranding a game, like basically taking a game that has a name like Space Hulk, but then just changing it so much that it's almost really just using the brand of the game, like to get people to look at it, but it's actually like a very different rule set, like almost completely different? Have you ever seen any examples of that?
What was that again?
Like, have you ever seen like a rebranding of a game where people taking a game that actually has a very strong brand to it and then just leveraging that, like from a business perspective, to then use a different set of rules, like almost like create a new set of rules? It's like a new game, but they basically call it that, because that could be almost another way that somebody would remake a classic game, but actually go to the extreme of just updating it to almost something like completely different.
Yeah, that's where, you could look at Warhammer Fantasy 9th edition, if you look at any of that right now. It's a fan base. Yeah, it's like they took what they thought was the best aspects of all the fantasy rules and worked it out and actually created a new set of rules that it's like, all right, fine. You don't want to leverage what used to work and people loved. You did have a massive fan base of people that played it. The only drawback was, depending on what army you had to spend, like I said, you had to spend $300 to $600 just to build an army, which was a deal breaker for some people when it comes to fantasy, because unlike 40K, you could slow grow it. You could do the same thing with the fantasy. We did the same thing, but it was where the fans are actually taking a genre that is now basically defunct. But they said they're bringing it back, but we talked about in one of our previous shows, believe it when I see it, type of thing. I'm close to Missouri. You have to show me state. So
the old world, they talked about it, saying down the road we're bringing it back. Yep.
Till that happens, it ain't happening. So, so they're kind of leveraging that aspect of it, where they're taking, and there's other aspects of games where somebody's, the Blood Bowl. You have a bunch of fantasy and even sci-fi football games out there, which basically riding the coattails of Blood Bowl.
Yeah.
And what's the
like Dread Bowl is one of them. Mantic has one, right, called Dread Bowl or something like that. Or
yeah, there's Dread Bowl, which is I think the sci-fi one,
mm-hmm.
and then there's they're just discontinuing it this month.
Guild Bowl.
Guild Bowl, yeah.
Yeah. So basically like a football style game in that environment. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't
playing Blood Bowl,
mm-hmm.
and they really enjoying it, and then something happened and they just kind of stopped, and I don't remember exactly why. It was one of those things, I guess they got burnt out on it or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used to have a league here. We had my brothers played in a league in Iowa City, 120 miles east of here. We had a league here, Blood Bowl, and suddenly it just, like overnight, it just quit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Games Workshop dropped the game too. I think that might have been why we quit too. It's like, oh, they're no longer supporting it. No, we're not going to play anymore. So,
which
fun.
is kinda,
we liked it.
Which is kind of odd if you really think about it, because the company isn't supporting it. If you've already got the rules and you already have the miniatures and you're already enjoying it, why do you care?
Yeah. Well,
right. I mean, if you think about it, if everything was working, unless you were looking for something very specific to come from them to make it better, you already had it.
Yeah. It brings up the Warhammer Epic. You got the Epic Gold system. The fan base, fans took it, rebuilt the whole system, and made it better, basically. And we still play it every once in a while. We've been playing it for 30 some years now. And even though it's been defunct for 12 years now, I think, in its last iteration. I think you have, Palmer, you got the last set of rules, don't you?
Armageddon. Yep.
Yeah. We bought the Armageddon rules and looked at it and go, no, this is not what we like. We'll go back to the old one. Let's keep playing the old one.
And when you already have it and it's what you like, you can do that, right?
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is just, and it's not a justification for them doing it, but when they have like paid design teams like that are basically in-house sculpting and rule writing and like all this stuff, I guess there might be a saturation in the business cycle that they see. Not to say they can't overcome that somehow, but they may feel that the bang for their buck at this point is now to get people started on another game. Because when you think about it, it's like we're paying all these people, we've already got 25 teams for Blood Bowl. I'm just making this up, and everybody's bought them, and it's saturated. We've been doing this for years, but people aren't buying as much for it anymore. And so instead of changing their game, we're just going to put that aside now, and we're just going to get them started on something else. And a lot of people complain about that. That's like one of the things that people don't like that companies do. But I guess when they're looking at putting food in the mouths of all these people, they're thinking we got to keep them busy with creating the next big thing.
You look at what Games Workshop did. They're going from the fantasy to Age of Sigmar. They still had the old miniatures. They made rules for the old miniatures. Eventually, they phased them out one way or the other and brought out new whole line. So if you wanted to continue playing your favorite style of, let's say you want to play elves, they've discontinued the old line, started new lines. So it's a model that forces people to buy new. And I understand why they do it, but you get the old guard, like you said, it's like, I got every single army and I got almost a complete, and then you discontinued it. It's like when you brought out a new book, I did buy the new handful of miniatures I needed to, whatever, but that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're not making a lot of money off of me.
I think in some respects, I think that's what's kind of nice about historical gaming is that, a new, golden set of rules comes out, right? But you could still use the same figures you have, and there's always one more unit you could add.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You've never completely finished that French Napoleonic army. There's always one more.
We've never made your army quite big enough.
Right.
Because in real life, you know, it was still 10 times bigger. So we have a little bit of ways we can go. We'll do a couple more units.
Right.
I don't have these 3 different army provinces over here. I need to build up a couple more brigades or army groups out of those. And it's like I keep buying and I keep buying. I got to repaint these guys, paint these guys in this color scheme. Oh yeah, this book says I need these guys over, so I buy some more miniatures. I keep buying. And then you get those individuals. It's like, hey, we're gonna play Napoleonics, and it's like, you know anything about it? I just know I want to play. Then you won't know the difference that these armies are not the correct color. You're just representing somebody.
Well, I've tested new sets of rules doing that because I didn't have, you know, the armies already painted and everything. So, you know, I went, okay, well, I'll just use these World War II figures to be 7 Years War. Here we go. All right, try it.
Yeah.
I've even done it where, you know, going into it, I've just, you know, taken the bases, you know, whatever base size I was going to use and put X's or, you know, a hash mark on it, the infantry and cavalry, and just said, okay, this is a unit. Let's just move it just to get used to playing the rules with the guys in the group. And enough that hopefully if we like the rules, they'll start to add to it. Right? They'll either, not all just me painting everything up, right? They'll say, oh, hey, I can do this army, or I can add this unit, or, you know, hopefully, you know, sometimes it still boils down to me just painting everything, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like the different aspects, you know, I remember playing and I painted up some Napoleonics and I put them on the table, and you get the old grown-ards out there and they look at it, you can't put those out there. Like, what do you mean? I painted them up. It's like, they're not appropriate for this battle. I'm like, I don't care.
That's right.
They're good enough to play for. It's like I paint them. They're French. I don't care. They're French.
Right. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing what people can fight over.
Yeah.
Listen, I get 1 week in a month to come out and relive this era. You're not going to come in and ruin it for me now.
Yep.
Especially the wrong ribbons.
I had shown off some American Revolution era figures that I had painted, and it was on Facebook. And somebody said, "Oh, hey, you know, didn't have that color," and I'm like, I don't care. I painted them. They're mine. You don't like it? Don't game with them. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff drives me crazy.
Yeah,
I spent all this time painting it, and you're going to tell me, hey, that epaulette's wrong? I'll keep it clean.
The white facing, they're supposed to have buff facing instead of that whitish color. That you know, they're too, you know, or they're too yellow. They need more, you know, like.
Yeah, I tell them to go find me a color photograph first.
Yeah.
Well, as you guys know, I do a little of everything. Like, I'm not a historical gamer, and I do both fictional and historical as far as my painting. But I've decided, like, within the last couple of years, I have a line in the sand when it comes to my uniforms and historical. And for me, that line in the sand is I grab a reference and I try to emulate the reference and I try to make it correct.
Yep.
The moment somebody shows me a reference that's different than the reference I have, that there's a conflict between the reference, and they call me on it, I tell them I don't care. If somebody is an expert out there of some kind or any sort of authority, and they actually do a reference and I follow it, the moment there's a conflict between that reference and some other expert, that's where you've lost me. Like, you know, I'm totally done. Yeah. And so that's what I say to them. And I've ran into that with my French and New War stuff already. I actually ran into that once, and I was just like, you know what? I checked a reference. That's what I'm going with. If you got a problem with it, you call up the author that wrote that reference. Don't talk to me.
Exactly.
If you have such a big problem with it, you make a reference book yourself. And then maybe I'll follow that one.
Well, it's a level of detail.
Either that, or I just hand them all my figures and go, here, you repaint them.
It's a level of detail. It's generally something very small. It's usually not like the color of their coat. It's usually like something very small on it. And at that point, it's a level of detail that I've surrendered. Like, you know, like I've done my best and I've surrendered that, and and I'll tell them that, like, without even being mad about it. Like, I'll tell them that. I'll say, listen, this is what I did. That's anything beyond that, I'm done.
Sometimes that's the beauty of gaming stuff in smaller scales, like 15 millimeter and smaller, because you can't see it.
Yeah, that's true.
It was like when Palmer was first started doing his 15 mils, and I was like, "You gonna paint the eyes?" No. What do you mean, no? You gotta paint the eyes.
Although I do know somebody who was so meticulous with painting 6 millimeter figures, he would paint the beards and the eyes on them.
Oh my gosh.
Civil War stuff, and I'm like, okay, no, that's beyond me. Just paint.
I don't know how you could not do googly eyes at that. I mean, like, at that scale, how do you not do googly eyes? It'll all be like.
The other day,
you see the eye slits, in there.
Oh, he's grabbing for something.
Not that one.
In 28 mil, I must admit, I like to paint the eyes. Over the years, I've started to paint the eyes only because. There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, this came today.
Oh, sweet.
But Mel and I, Striker 11B, he's one of the guys, the friend. We were just discussing about painting up, doing the American Civil War in 3 mil. And it's going out and buying a bag of rice and mounting the rice on little bases. Blue tops and light blue bottoms, and with a little dot of a little more blue with a little there you go. That's your whole soldier.
Mustache right across the whole thing.
And for $3, I built entire armies of both sides.
Lifetime supply, a bag of rice. You could be doing miniatures for the rest of your life.
Yeah. True story. You guys may or may not know, but I used to be the event coordinator for Infalot, which is the local gaming convention up here in Washington. There was a gentleman who did the 100-day campaign for Napoleon's last days, right?
Yep.
His armies were in 3 millimeter. So he had the entire campaign on the tabletop. It took about 6 hours to play the entire game, but he had all the units all in 3 millimeter, and they played an entire campaign that way in 6 hours. I thought that was just amazing that he had that much effort, and the tables laid out all the roads and all the mountains and everything for based on the map for that entire campaign wasn't there. So it was just absolutely amazing to look at, and that he pulled it off. He kept people there for 6 hours to play. So totally doable. You should do it. Go for it, Rusty.
We did a battle in 6 mil, Napoleonics. The guys, this group of guys did all the painting, all the stuff, and they laid it out. And the table was, I think, 20 foot long. It was what was it? The bolt starts with an L. What was the battle? Major battle for the Brent. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, which shocks me. But
Battletech. I don't have a drink.
Maybe that's the problem. I've been drinking too much. But yeah, the table was at least 20 foot long, and they had probably 5 foot wide at least. And they had all the hills and everything. They laid it out just perfect for the entire Leipzig. That's it. Thanks, Curtis.
Thank you, Curtis.
I knew somebody here would know. It's like
so we had a live fact checking.
And we played that. And it was a whole 3-day battle. We played for 3 days, 12-hour days.
Wow,
nice.
So long days.
Yeah, started like 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Well, I guess the third day we finished at 4, roughly 4 o'clock. Well, not quite. So basically, it was 30
Did it
hours.
turn out the same way?
Yeah, it pretty much ended that way. I think a lot more casualties because obviously when you're playing the eye in the sky, you can move troops a little bit better and get them in the right position. But
very cool. I like seeing epic games like that.
You see them every once in a while. That's why I like going to historical conventions. You get to see these big battles like that every once in a while.
Well, we do have another interesting topic tonight because I have a feeling we could go on for a lot longer with this one. So the idea of classic games and remaking them and how you should do the rules. I think we went in a lot of different directions tonight with that, but I think we certainly have answered our thoughts on the question. And so, I'm not going to summarize
What were they?
I'll summarize it.
Go ahead.
You can remake something, but make sure you don't alienate your old fans.
Right. Yep.
Don't throw a hand.
And don't make things too confusing for the new fans either.
Yeah.
And we got there was a short list. So this next one's a bit different, and we oftentimes will do like hobbying versus gaming kind of topics, actually, because it is quite interesting because our hobby is diverse, and it actually has both the gaming aspect and the intellectual aspect of rules and things like that, and then we also have the artistic aspect too, and crafting and things like that. And so basically our second topic tonight is the idea of painting for a task like rice, like we were just talking about, for the purpose of representing units, or even just painting your miniatures to get them on a table for a period of time, and just to get them so they meet the basic requirement of looking like that unit. And then also painting miniatures and painting busts, which I'll talk about here in a second. Victor's talked about that. There's painting sculpture in small scale, can be an art form. And even for wargaming, we have character models, like you could have like your general that you'd spend more time on for whatever reason. And so there are a lot of reasons to spend more time, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so I thought it'd be interesting to ask folks what they thought about that. How do you approach it in your own hobbying? Do you like to do both? Do you see it more one way versus the other? And just your thoughts in general. And one of the reasons I did think of you, Victor, on the show for tonight when we were discussing these topics is that I've always enjoyed your oil painting of miniatures. Like when I actually want to see somebody oil painting, doing something different, I oftentimes look at your channel. Coincidentally, just in the last day, I saw on the Marvel Crisis Protocol page, somebody painted a Green Goblin with oil paints. And It made me think of your channel, but it's very cool. They're painting with oil paints. It's something different. It adds a different richness and flavor that just looks different than acrylic painting. And so it made me think of you for this topic too, as a guest, to just add that component to it. And so, but having said that, you answered first last time. I think what I'm going to do is just go to Rusty first, as maybe comment first for this topic, and just get your thoughts, Rusty. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes.
I agree.
Well,
I totally agree. So let's go to the comments.
I do both. I'm going to be doing the same thing right now. Is if it's like, let's say, rank and file, the basic type of troops or something of that nature. That's for wargaming aspect of it. I will go with the kind of the minimalist amount, but I want to make them look good. So I will put enough time into them to make them look good, but I'm not going to break the bank. And I just happened to be watching a video today, that one of my own, that popped up. It's like, hey, do you watch Hellcorrex 26? It's like, I just got recommended to watch one of my own videos. Why? And so I just like, okay, I clicked on it. And it was the one where I was working on one of my dystopian war miniatures. And the guy asked me, I was like, well, how many hours do you work on let's say this miniature? And I was like, well, it's probably 30 hours. I put 30 hours basically on a miniature. It's what, it's a fairly big one.
Right.
And it's like, I had no problem putting that much time into something that big because I wanted it to look really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is a centerpiece model. And I wouldn't put 30 hours in on a guy, a rank and file type of guy, but I would put, like this Bull Taurus right here with the rider on it. He might get 30 hours because he's going to be a centerpiece miniature.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you put Vic, you put a lot of hours in on your 54 millimeter or your bus, that type of stuff that you work on. And it makes total sense to me because that is a total diversion from, let's say, normal miniature painting, because this is almost something, say, museum style quality of what you're going to be putting on display.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I kind of do the same things. Like if I'm painting for gaming and I'm painting in mass, I'm going to do the basic details. Now, it also holds true based on the scale of the figure too. So like if I'm going to paint 6 millimeter figures, it's real basic, right? Mm-hmm. Brightest color for whatever the coat is, brightest color for the pants, hat, gun, you're done. If it's a 25 or 28 millimeter figure, there's going to be a little bit extra detail in it because it could be seen, right? But I'm not going to slave over it for 100 hours to paint that one figure or 30 of them or whatever it is I need. But yeah, for the larger scale stuff, yes, I am going to put a lot of hours in it. And sometimes it's not even so much the painting time. Sometimes it's, for me, it's more sometimes with those things, crap, I did that. Does that actually look good? And then I have to put it down and walk away from it. And then I can't go back to it for like a week. And when I come back to it, go, oh, okay, I made a right choice. Okay. Because if I will start to second guess myself on the larger scale stuff, and I'll go, okay, I'm going to screw this up now, put it down, put it away, walk away, go paint something else. But yeah, for gaming stuff, it also depends, like my painting a vehicle, I'll probably spend a little bit more time on, right? Because that's going to be, like your dragon, right? It's going to be a centerpiece. People are going to be looking at that king tiger that's sitting on the table because it's a really big target. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm putting in, like if I'm painting ships, well, there aren't a lot of ships out on the table.
Right.
So, those, I want a little bit more detail on them because they're going to stand out because they're, by themselves or, in a very small fleet. So you're going to pick up on that kind of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it really depends on where you're at and what you're trying to achieve. I think will, at least for me, and it sounds like for Rusty too, that you'll dictate how much detail or what you're going to spend on that. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, hold on, I got.
Do you ever, as you're grabbing that stuff, I mean, like there's a component to this question that's saying, art, versus art versus playing a game, and one of the things that I noticed with your channel, like you did bring out the color wheel once and kind of threw out the challenge if anybody wanted to just do this test where you just pick a couple of colors randomly and go with it. And, to a degree, I get the impression that sometimes with your pieces, and the busts would be a good example, is that it's satisfying a purely artistic approach. Like you're not planning on using it in a game. You're not putting this bust around on the table. And so, and there's nothing to say that people don't approach their miniature, like a miniature key piece in the same way, like getting the same value out of that experience, painting just happens to be, one miniature. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting to hear you guys' thoughts on that too, but go ahead, you grab something.
So it's all in pieces because I actually have not put it together yet, but this is a model of Gamora from the Avengers. Okay, so here's my hand compared to the body. Now, when I go to paint this will probably take me months to paint, because I don't know how detailed I can get in on this, but there's all of the threading and everything that's on here, and I'm going to paint all that detail.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So So it really depends on what I'm looking at. Will depend on where I go with it, right?
I could see putting 20 hours of labor in just cleaning it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
You know, it's funny. I didn't think about this until just now as you guys were talking when thinking about this topic. But when I first started painting, it was almost easier to paint the simpler guys than to spend more time on the main characters, because the simpler guys, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. Even as I was learning it, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, the basics, and I kind of knew mostly how it was going to come out, because I might have painted a unit before that. But then when I wanted to paint, let's say, my Farseer for Eldar, like in Warhammer, which is like your head wizard, or like I'd call it a wizard for somebody that's not familiar with them, but I wanted to spend a lot of extra time and I wanted them to look good, right? Like I wanted them to look really good. And so what I usually would do is I usually would stretch myself on my skills, you know, to try to do something even a little different, even above and beyond what I've been doing. And sometimes it ended up looking worse than the regular guys. You know what I mean? Because I'm actually like trying something new. I'm stretching myself. And so sometimes actually it's counterintuitive, but sometimes spending extra time and actually doing something new, you're not always guaranteed the outcome that you want. You know, like in the end, you could spend a lot more time, and actually oftentimes we do better with the stuff we know because we've seen it work and we know it works, and it's quicker because we've done it before and everything's fine. But then when we try to spend more time, sometimes we mess up or we don't get quite the feeling we wanted, and we have the lead character looking worse than the average Joe guys in our view, like when we look at it. You know, maybe not everybody else's, but in our view. But as time goes on and you get better and better and practice, then usually time spent equates to more success and more detail and like more color blending or whatever it is that you spend the time on. And, you know, for me personally, I've noticed that as time went on, my standard for even my basic guys kind of tends to go up a little more, but I still do cap it. Like, you know, in the sense that I never spend as much time on like a main character, like of any, you know, whether it be one superhero or one general, you know, in an army or something, or a captain or something. I always spend more time on those, a little bit more time. But as I learn more, I do want to do a little bit more highlighting, like even on the average Joes than I would have at one point. And so that part is nice that I do. And I do end up spending a little more time, like even on the bulk of them. But I would agree with you guys that you basically try to separate your time and your activity to the function that you're doing. Like if you're trying to get them on the table, then you have to make a sacrifice somewhere, you know, like basically you only have so much time. But I do find almost as a separate thing, like I like to pull things out just to do for artistic purposes. And I did a bust actually of a Roman sort of legionnaire, and it was really inspired by Victor's channel because I'd never really done busts before that. It was the first time I did one. I did a Pegasus Models bust, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the experience quite a bit. But I've also done other things, like, and they're not always, kind of like I was saying, I was at a certain point in my painting back then. But when I pulled this guy out before, but even when I grabbed like demons from like Warhammer, you know, and this was actually basically a lot of it was custom. Like this is just a regular Warhammer Eldar that's about to get eaten by this, you know, demon. And you know, I didn't make this guy really to play in game as much. I just did him more because I wanted to paint him. And the thing from Marvel that I just kind of grabbed would be an example of just wanting to paint it up just to paint it. And you get to stretch your skills. And I almost, for me, it's almost more like art than it is actually like painting a miniature to get on the table, because I really may have no intention of ever using it, like on the gaming table. And in those cases, I think it's fun, like just it's another aspect of the hobby, you know, is that it does, even though we're wargamers, we can easily cross into that modeling sort of side, or that side to just paint just for display.
No, and you know what? I remember you painting that bust, and you did a great job with it. You should do more. You really should.
Yeah, they're kind of expensive.
Yeah,
I've noticed that. I look at them occasionally, and I'm like, okay, so how many miniatures here and the bust here? I'm always like balancing like what I should do.
See, what you should do is you should treat yourself. For every 10 miniatures you do, you buy a bust.
There you go.
Okay.
I almost got tricked into buying the fake ones on eBay. Like there's some like guys that are actually whole nother discussion, but with some of those busts, I noticed that the Pegasus models in particular, they're not all official. You know, like sometimes, and I'm trying to avoid that. I think we had maybe a little discussion at a certain point. I don't want to give the money not to the artist, right? And so, so I've almost got. I was like, oh wow, that's a really good deal. I should pick that one up.
Yeah, and you know, because I do. Like I have a long list of companies that, you know, I buy busts and the large scale figures from and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, through searching through the internet and stuff, I have actually found some sites where, you know, you look at the price and go, that can't be right. Mm-hmm. You know, and unfortunately, some of these places are, you know, in Russia and China. You know, so yeah, I stay away from those. I try to make sure that the artist is getting their money for what they've done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was say is that for me, you know, I buy the stuff from Forge World. The whole reason I buy stuff from Forge World is that this is my version of buying a bust. Mm-hmm. And working on something is that then when it's done, I can actually have it on the table as a centerpiece. And I really enjoy taking the time and effort on working on something. And it's like, I have to mentally do it every once in a while and grab something that is, you put a lot of time and effort into. And I liked your idea where you work on something and it's like, I'm not really sure if that works good and just put it off the side. I don't give myself enough time like that. Mm-hmm. Is when I get started on a project like that, where I will start working on it, I will work on it practically nonstop until it's done because I just get so focused on it. It's like that's all. That's my whole world right there. That's all I'm doing.
I had to train myself to do it, and like I've built, you know, some plastic models. I think got a couple of videos I threw up. I was building a 1/16 scale tank. Mm-hmm. I plowed through that thing, and I shouldn't have. There were certain points where I should have stopped and stepped back because I screwed it up, you know, because I was rushing through it because I was so into building it that I wanted to finish it. Well, that was a mistake.
Yep.
You know, and, you know, in fact, I was going to put them up in my next video for this week. I bought some cars that I want to try building because I haven't done that since I was, I don't know, 10, something like that, you know. So I thought, all right, let's give it a shot. So I bought a couple, but I know as soon as I start building it, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to rush through it, and I'm going to have to pace myself, do a little bit, stop, put it aside, go work on something else, come back to it, so I don't screw it up because what ended up happening is I'll get sloppy.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what ended up happening with that tank, you know. So
that was a nice big tank too.
Yeah.
Lots of detail.
You know,
I got another one actually that I'm going to build since I made the mistakes the first time. And actually what ended up making me stop were the tracks because the tracks were all individual. Mm-hmm. And I got one to work where it was perfectly straight. And then I put the second track together and it looks like somebody's got scoliosis. And I can't figure out what I did wrong to make it look like that, so it won't fit. Mm-hmm. But again, it was the same thing. I just busted through it. So
I was thinking when you were building that tank, it was a FT-17, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I was like looking at that, and I was like, you know, if I really screwed something up, screwed the pooch on it, I was like, okay, could I turn this into a battle damaged looking vehicle?
I thought about that too.
Make a diorama out of it and just turn it into something that was on the battlefield.
A piece of terrain, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I had thought about that, but at 1/16 scale, that's a hell of a piece of terrain.
Well, it's something you put in the living room and really annoy the wife.
Right. Yeah. Make a coffee table out of it.
You know, I happen to know, like, so we're talking about some of the stuff that you've done, Victor, and you bring it right on your channel a lot, like your sort of artistic projects alongside your miniature projects. I know, Rusty, that you do art. Like, you know, I've seen your art that you've done, like stuff that we've chatted and stuff, and I've seen some things you've done that's not even in the miniature hobby, like watercolor and like just different things. And so I know that you have like an artist component to you. But I also know as wargamers, we're oftentimes really distracted because there's so many rule sets, so many games to play, and most of us are behind on the miniatures that we've painted, and so we always have units that we're trying to churn out like assembly line. And so that, for me at least, I can't speak for you guys, but there's that conflict where it's like, well, I could start this and there'd be really no purpose other than my own pleasure and like getting better at painting and all that stuff. That's not important. But or I could just do this next unit of miniatures, right? Like, so I could allow myself this time, to do this like fun, like artistic project, alongside what I'm doing, or I could just put it aside for later until I get another couple of units painted. This right here is an example of something that I even put on my, I don't know if it was this year or last year, I put this on my to-do list, and it's just sat here next to this monitor, like this computer monitor. And this is a Japanese model.
Hold it up a little more. What does that say?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's this part, yeah. It's called the New Rally Pawn, but the key part here is it's made by this. It's part of this company, Machining Krieger is the name. For people that are into the scale modeling community, they oftentimes might know about this. BMB Builder is a modeler that oftentimes comments on my channel, but then also for those of you that know Dread on YouTube that does a lot of historical and other stuff, he's done some of these models. It's basically a fictional world, but it's based kind of on post-World War II sci-fi type game. So there's a lot of World War II imagery in some of this. But in any case, these are large. They're not for wargaming at all. Like, they're complete just models. It's 1/20 scale. And I just kind of got interested in doing this. I've had this for years. I've never gotten to it. I've always found a reason or something else to do instead of it. And I was planning on doing this as a diorama, and just kind of having a burned out building and having one of these robots looking inside at a TV set that's broken with like a couch, and just kind of making a cool looking diorama, like post-apocalyptic looking thing. And I've never gotten to it. I've done some other things, but I have so many of these kind of projects I'd like to do, and I'm always trying to justify to spend time on something like the bust, to take enjoyment out of stretching my skill set and just taking the enjoyment of just having an artistic project, like alongside my miniatures that I do for wargaming. It's a struggle because I always feel like I'm behind on one thing, and then so you just have to make time and justify. I guess if you're just more productive. Right now I'm not doing anything, so I could have done 10 of these projects if I wanted to. But
see, that's one of the nice things about painting with oils is that you have to put it down and let it dry.
Oh yeah.
Then you come back to it.
It takes time.
It does take time, so you can actually do both. But one thing that I have found with painting the larger scale stuff, it made my smaller scale figures look better. A little bit more, even though, I'm still painting for the tabletop with those, the attention to detail, and it's forced me to slow down so I can paint it a little bit better, even though I may not be putting, top grade, artwork on the figure, but it does look better, even if it's a basic paint job.
Yeah.
Right. And, painting the larger scale stuff has slowed me down on the smaller stuff to paint, a little bit better.
Yep.
I noticed that there is a transition from learning the skill set to paint the bigger stuff. You're looking at even more micro details that suddenly it is working its way into the smaller scale. And sometimes I have to force myself to move faster and stop doing that if I want to work on get a force out pretty quickly. Is that I can't spend 5 hours on this one miniature. Stop it! What am I doing to myself?
Right.
There was there's a YouTube guy out there, Vince Ventrella.
Yep.
Yes.
I think that's his name. Couple of weeks ago or whatever, he put up a video where he was painting a horse, and he was doing, it was 28 millimeter horse, and he was showing how to paint the hair on the horse. And I mean, the technique he was using was great. You know, he was showing how to do it, and everything was wonderful. The problem is when, or at least for me, it wasn't really a problem. It just to my eye was it was at a scale.
Mm-hmm.
At that scale, you won't see the hair.
Yeah.
Right. And that, you know, so I said, hey, you know, you did a great job, a great explanation. I said, but, you know, to me, the scale, this doesn't fit what you're doing. Maybe if it was a fur coat, you might see, you know, that kind of detail. But on a horse, that's very fine hair. You're not going to see it. He said, oh, you know, and he did say, yeah, you're right. He said, but, you know, it's just to show off the technique and something fun to do. And I'm like, yeah, great. You know, I totally get that. But, you know, again, you're scaling it down, right? You're going from painting a 54 millimeter horse where you can paint in the hair to a 28 millimeter horse where, okay, I'm just going to block it in with color because that's what you're going to see.
Yeah, you're just going to see the kind of reflection of the gloss of the hair.
Right.
About the only place you might see any detail is on the mane or the tail. That's
exactly.
about it.
Exactly.
So.
You know, and it's funny. Some people could say this. I've come to really enjoy painting my French Indian war miniatures over the years, and I transitioned from not painting eyes to painting eyes on 28 mil. And you can argue that when you, even at table height, like when I play the game, I'm not going to see those eyes like when I'm playing the game. Like you can, and I will not disagree with you. Like, you know, I'm not going to argue that point. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is Tristan or Athleth, I don't know if you guys know his YouTube channel. He's been around a long time. He hasn't been putting videos up in a while, but he made the comment once that when he paints a miniature's eyes, the miniature comes alive to him. Like that, you know, that he finds when he paints the eyes, it comes alive. And for me too, when I actually started to paint eyes and get a little bit better, I took a lot of failures, you know, and it takes a lot of trial and error. But on 28 mil, when I finally kind of got comfortable, I really enjoyed the outcome. I mean, when I actually put my video up and I actually show them up close and spinning around, I like the fact that I can see those eyes staring at me, and it just has an effect that I just enjoy. Do I need that on the table to play the game? Should other people do that? No, not necessarily. You know, but for me, I really enjoy it. And when I do look up close, I see that detail and I like it. And I don't know if that's similar to the hair on the horse kind of thing too. You know, I'm not sure.
You know, I'm certainly not dissuading anybody from painting any way they want to. Right. If you want to, if you want to paint the mustache on a 6 millimeter figure, have at it. You know, I'm not going to tell you not to, you know, but it really depends on what is the effect that you want. If you want to paint the eyes on the 28 millimeter figure, paint the eyes on the 28 millimeter figure. It's, you know, if you want to practice painting the hair on a horse, have at it. You know, this is what's fun about the hobby, is that you can basically do what you want and make it look the way you want it to.
Right.
You know, unless of course you come across people who squabble about the piping on the epaulet, but whatever.
They lose sleep over it. We don't.
And you telling someone else to do something a certain way is a totally different thing than you electing to do something on yours. It's like totally different.
Exactly. When it comes to wargaming miniatures, there's give and take. You know, you have to give something away to be able to finish a project. Because eventually you want it on the table. And it's like, what am I willing to give up to put it on the table? And you know, when I painted those Blood and Plunder miniatures up, you know, that were actually used in the book for description for one of the armies. And I was like, I spent almost every waking moment working on them. Just like, we need them in a week. Okay, well, how much detail? We need them as best as you can. I'm like, okay, all right. I'll lose this. I'm sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night. And I'm like, all my days, like I'm painting nonstop. just to get them done. And that's one of the reasons why when you see all my Blood and Plunder stuff sitting off the side constantly, I was so burned out. I burned myself out on Blood and Plunder, painting Blood and Plunder miniatures, that I had a hard time getting back to them because I. So that's why they sat there forever. I wanted to show you this. This is something. You know, you were talking about artwork. This is one of the artwork that I painted up.
Very nice.
Wow, that is nice.
Yeah,
I painted. That's a watercolor.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So
I noticed you decided to paint hair on the horse. Just kidding.
Well, you can see it.
No, exactly.
It's there.
No, it's bigger. It's a large thing. Yeah.
But you know, we were talking about putting detail of horses. When you look, it's like my parents. I grew up with horses, and when you look at a horse, you don't see the detail of a horse's hair at all. It's a gloss.
Yeah, it's
Right.
So
shiny.
when you see the light, it's not till you get right up on top of it, and you can see when you're. You know, it's like, oh yeah, there is hair there, but at a slight distance, you know, you just see a nice glossy coat.
You made a comment. Oh, go ahead, Vic.
I was going to say, you know, my rule of thumb is, you know, I hold it out, you know, arm length. If I can't see it, I don't paint it.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
true.
it's, you know, like if I was to give you a detailed shot of like the 6mm figures that I do, really up close, they look like crap. You know, but it's 6mm and on the table and in mass, it looks perfect.
Yeah.
And there is actually a technique of painting for the table to look good. And like in the sense that there are miniatures that you make pop, like with color transitions that are stark, that look really good, like at the table level, like so much so that they really stand out as looking good. But then when you go up close, if you're somebody that doesn't like to see stark transitions and you like extremely smooth blends of painting character models, then it doesn't look good to you, like when you go up close. And you can make like somebody would say, well, this really doesn't look good, like, you know, and you say, well, no, it really does when you look at it the way it's intended to, you know. So, but you made a comment earlier about painting better the smaller miniatures after having done busts. And the only I wanted to say one thing about that is in doing the one bust that I did, the one thing I noticed that I really appreciated was that when I painted a really larger human, like, you know, and you actually have to paint the face like very differently, because when you do the smaller miniatures, we learn a lot about capturing detail, you know, like with washes and like with various things, like to make details stand out. But I noticed when I had like all of these really large flat surfaces, like, you know, because a face, even though there's a lot of constant change in a larger model, it's still primarily like big flat spaces that you normally wouldn't have to show color transition across. And to me, that was really interesting, like to learn that, to basically challenge yourself to create color variation across big surfaces and to try to capture detail quite differently. And even though you're painting a sculpture, because what we do as miniature painters is we're basically painting little sculptures. And so you make a bigger sculpture and all of a sudden the side of a Roman legionary's face is closer to a tank than it is an actual face. Like, you know, like it's flatter than it is, you know, wrinkly and, you know, like the way a 28 mil space would be. And so I thought that was very interesting. And I could see how it would almost change the way you would do things in some ways.
Yeah, try in the future if you ever get like Numidians or something of that nature, where you got the dark skin infantry, and try to do a bust like that, is that you'll find that there's actually more purples and stuff in their skin than there's actually. It's not brown; it's actually purples and that kind of nature of the thing. That's something I learned when I was going through painting in art school. Is that it's like they were discussing how to paint dark skin, and like, well, you're going into the purple scale. Like, what? And
So
like violets and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's I actually use this book quite a lot. Okay, because the way this is detailed, you're mixing lights, shadows, base tones, and everything in between it. You know, I'll show you. And this is for anybody who's going to paint. This is actually an excellent guide on what skin tones can incorporate.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this, I'll grab a pointing stick here. So this little blob is your base, right? And then you work from that base to create all these other colors, except for your lights and shadows, which you then add to the rest of this to create this. So it's more than just 3 colors.
Yeah.
Right. So, when you're painting your 25 millimeter figure and you grab, I don't know, your Vallejo or your Foundry paint, right? You're not doing this. But when you go to paint a portrait or you're going to paint something larger, right, you need this detail.
Yeah.
And this really helps, or at least for me, mostly because, I've said it before that I'm colorblind, so this helps.
Right. Absolutely.
I can see what I'm doing. But it's also a great way just to, look at something and go, oh, okay, like this other page that's over here, a little bit darker skin tones. Look at the contrast between those two. There's, and it is amazing just what colors can go into different skin tones, anywhere. I mean, look at the 3 of us right here on the screen, right? I mean, there's so many different colors going on right here, right?
Yeah, the glare off our forehead.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. You're absolutely right. Like, and there's a lot that we assume. Like, we just assume things, like you don't look into the, like, you just assume something, like, because we process information and we see what makes sense and quickly and just kind of go with that. But if you actually like look close at someone or something and you look at all, like even a leaf, right, like that you think is just green and you just call it green, but then when you go up close to it and you actually look at maybe the variations in certain leaves and things like that, like it's just totally, you can get lost in all the detail and all the variations, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Catch up with some of our comments here. Where was it? Okay.
Yeah, Curtis must be getting cramps in his fingers. He's been typing a lot.
Aren't Forge World models really expensive? Yes. Which I brought up to is like when I have the fair, I make a lot of money at the fair. I take a certain percentage and that's what I use for my purchases for the year for buying stuff from Forge World. And so I have to plan these things out, and I just can't willy-nilly just buy these things, as they are a chunk of change. They're big models. Some of them are pretty big models too. You get in some of those like knights and stuff like that. Well, you spend a lot of time, and there's, like you said, there's a lot of flat surfaces on them, and actually trying to make a color gradient to make it look like you have reflection when there isn't really reflection on the model or depth. You have to actually create it. It's like you never looked at them myself. It's like, if you ever want to look at some really good models, there's lots of good companies out there produce resin miniatures, and most of the ones I look at is like Forge World's the biggest one. I spend hours, too many hours looking at them. Go, oh, I wish I had the money for that one. Oh, I want that one. I want this one.
There's one that I've wanted to paint for years, like a character model they make, and I can't justify after shipping and all of it. It's just like one miniature, like basically 28 mil scale, and I'm spending, you want me to spend $130 or something, and I'm like, I just can't do it. I just can't.
Yeah.
So the Gamora figure I showed you, okay,
yeah,
that was my treat to myself. For the life of me right now, I'd have to dig it out again to get the artist's name, but he's in the Philippines, I think. And he does these amazing sculptures, but that Gamora piece was like $200, and so that was a treat.
Yeah.
I wish that some of the Forge World stuff was only $200.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I think that's the most expensive thing I've bought.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is just, well, for me, I just see it as a 28 mil miniature, right? And I'm not looking at, like, you're right off the bat, you can look at that and look at it as something different. I mean, like that's something you can put on a stand and it'll actually sit on a table and you can look at it, you know, whereas like this is like this big, you know. But at the same time, even that, I mean, for many people, you know, that would be very much a treat, like very much, you know, for some folks, that's half of their PS4, like that they want to buy, right? Or whatever it is.
Is that one of the Primark miniatures?
No, actually, believe it or not, it's just a supportive like leader. It's not even. It's actually Erebus from the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's actually
word bearers.
No, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it's actually the purple and gold. The first Legion. They're the first Legion, number one of all of them. But he's just it's a guy coming with a jetpack down, and he's like standing on a knight, like literally one of those like robots that are basically broken down. And it's a beautiful model. And I remember him from the books that I read, and I love the way they did the sculpture. Everything is great. I'd love to paint it up, but it's just like for the you know, I'm also kind of always like, it's not even metal. It's resin, and it's 28 mils, and it's it's like $130. I can't actually justify it personally, but that's where everybody's different in the way they actually spend money and the way they justify things. You know, right. I can that might sit on a shelf, and I might look at it for years and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Whereas I might, in my head, justify a starter army for a new game that I might only play twice, but because it's an army, I'll spend the money on it, and it's equivalent, but I've justified it somehow, right? And so it's just, we're all different, right? In the way we look at money and the way what we should be getting out of it and stuff like that. So,
well, I'm looking through the Forge World stuff now, trying to figure out which one you're talking about.
I have recently started to kind of pare down the number of miniatures I have, gaming miniatures, just to a couple of different areas now.
That's where we have to hit the heresy button.
But with selling that stuff off, it's now giving me a little bit more capital to either buy more larger scale stuff or add to the stuff that I am keeping, right? So that we always talk about trying to finish a project. Well, I'm trying to attempt to get to that point, and I had my hands in so much other stuff. I'm like, okay, this is getting dumb. I can't keep doing this, so I have really tried to just go, no, okay, sounds great, somebody else can do it, I'll just go play.
And that's important too, right? I mean, and with a lot of my gaming friends locally, this is another subject altogether, but that's kind of what we do. I mean, if somebody's really wants to do something, it's like, if you want to paint both sides, I'll play again. I'll be your opponent if you'd like, but I'm not jumping in. Like, I'm not jumping in. And then we do a lot of that, like where we have like one person that will get it and that's their thing, and I'll get something else and I'll paint both sides. And that allows you to satisfy your need to paint it up and own it and to play it, and then allows you to still have an opponent. So
you talking about the Emperor's Children?
Yep. And it's among their character series models. If you wanted to throw it up on the screen, he's got long hair to the side. It's a beautiful model. It's actually not one of the more expensive ones of that character series, believe it or not. He's
just look, the one that's fine, he's like, there's Fulgrim, Primark.
Yep. It's not him, but
they may not produce him now. That's a question.
Well,
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll answer that question later, I guess. All right, where were we for questions? Okay, I put up, they did say that Dread is now Solvent Abuse UK. Catch that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got the actual model up already, Rusty, if you want me to. I'll just share my screen here, see if I can do that. Share screen, and do you guys see him?
Not yet. You got to open up your second window.
Okay. You're right. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so here he is. And so,
hang on a second. Let me click on that one.
There we go.
Yeah. So he's sort of on this. I thought it was a knight. I thought it's some sort of robot thing, but he's basically this guy. You know, he's got this huge hammer. I remember him from the actual books because I read the books, and I just was kind of like, oh, I'd love to paint that guy up. I really like that piece. But yeah, I'm just looking at the image. I'm not sure. This is 2 Forge World. So if I click the page and we say how much money, we see how much it is. So it's 47 British pound, but that's not including, the delivery to Canada. And then when you convert it to Canadian dollars, you're looking at over 100, I can tell you, Canadian dollars for sure. And it's just, 28 mil model. Granted, when you look at it, actually there's an alternative head as well. But
oh wow, some great detail on that.
Yeah,
it's
like
beautiful
Forge World stuff is just they make some fantastic miniatures and models for putting out. I have one of the very first.
So would you guys actually use this in a game?
Yeah, it could be used in a game.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely could. Although I don't play the game, and so for me, and I don't have that army. So for me, it was just purely for what we were talking about, more of an artistic thing, like just to have. Or just because I was inspired, just because I read the books and just would like to paint the model. But definitely, I could never. It was one of those things I always looked at, but I could never do it. I was just, so.
The cat went to sleep. Sorry, not. She's off sleeping somewhere, not dead sleep.
Yeah, it's like I'm always perusing over the Forge World site, just looking at stuff, and it's like you would go broke trying to get everything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a wish list of stuff. You're like, eventually I'd like to get this, or I'd like to get that, and I kind of narrowed it. My
Santa Claus.
What's that?
So it sounds like you need to ask Santa Claus.
Santa Claus will look at me and go, "No, you can't have that." It's like every once in a while, the wife will like, "What did you just spend all that money on?" I just bought some miniatures. You didn't buy a bunch. It's like, I made order Forge World stuff. Oh my God. You just spent how much? You don't want to know. You only know what you need to know. These are not the miniatures you're looking for.
Right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I was trying to think of where we kind of fall on this topic. And it really was just what are your thoughts on painting, for production or for a purpose versus painting for enjoyment or, just to try something new. And, it's obviously the answer on this is always to do what you want to do. And it's to meet your own needs, right? Whether it be for gaming or whether it be for trying to get enjoyment some other way. But not sure in summary, it seemed like, you both kind of will paint either way, just depending on what the situation calls for, really.
Is that Harley Quinn? Is that what the statue was?
We're talking about this is Chris. Games. Yeah.
So he's doing a statue of Harley. So I'm thinking, is that like Harley Quinn?
I would most likely.
That would be my guess. So we got a whole group of people just popped in here.
Hey, unaccomplished. How are you? Long time no talk to. There was. Gotta find it now. Oh, yeah.
You finished your scotch?
Oh yeah. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I thought I did, but I've got this drop left, and I can't leave that there.
Now that's heresy.
Leaving scotch behind. One
So
does not do that. One simply does not walk in and finish their scotch quickly.
that's right. You can't wait. A friend of mine from work printed this 3D Yoda.
Oh yeah,
Baby Yoda. Sorry,
nice.
It's a little bright because
Yeah. White is a tendency to pick
Yeah.
up the light like that. Yeah.
which I have to paint.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, I'm scared shitless to paint this thing.
Is that filament one or is that resin?
It's filament.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is it? Are you a Star Wars fan?
Yes.
Okay. And did you watch the series?
Yes.
Okay. So then, I was just curious. Is it? So why would you be scared? Because you paint things that size.
It's something that I'm painting it for my wife, so I want to make sure it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. B, the coloring on it kind of frightens me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make sure I get that correct. And it's going to take a lot of prep work because of the filament. There's lots of ridges in it, so I'm going to have to go in and really smooth that out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take a lot of work, and I've been sitting on this thing for 6 months now. Just because I'm like, yeah, I don't want to touch it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it just takes me going, okay, today's the day I'm going to start this. And
getting that first coat of paint on will help a lot.
Yeah, and that's usually what it takes, but I also have to be in the right mindset for it.
Yeah.
Like, I have a dragon that's off over here that my daughter wanted me to paint for her. And I got the base coat on it, and I went, okay, I can't do this right now. And I put it off. And it's been sitting behind me for like a year.
Right.
I always wanted to pick up the smog model, the big resin one, the massive one.
Wow. Yeah.
I was like, I seen that thing. I was like, oh, I want that so bad, but I don't want to spend the money to go with that.
I actually have, I don't have it here where I can show you, but there's a company out here called Stonehouse Miniatures, and they produce some resin terrain pieces. And I bought a piece, and it's fairly large. It's, about, I don't know, say about yay big or so, and it's a destroyed building and all this kind of stuff. And it's got all this detail in it. And I bought it, and then I didn't touch it for 3 years because I couldn't figure out how to paint it. Because I kept looking at it, go, okay, well, how do I want to do this? How do I want to get, and I'd start getting in my head about how to do it. And then it took one of my friends to go, hey, stupid, you know how to paint? Paint the damn thing. And then I sat down and I finally primed it, and I went, oh, okay, and I just kind of started in a corner instead of looking at the whole thing. I started in one corner and I kept working out of the corner, and it took me about 2 months to finish it because there was so much detail on it.
Yeah.
But it's at times the centerpiece for some of my battles because I put so much work into it. But yeah, stuff like this, sometimes it's like, okay, I got to be in the mood. I'm not in the mood yet.
Yeah.
And
sometimes the hardest thing is getting started.
Yeah.
I would find the hard part for me sometimes is just you're sitting there and you're looking at it. What I can paint it. I know I can do it. It's not a problem. But what do I put on it? It's like, what color schemes do I want? And there's sometimes I talk myself out of how to do something, and you end up, it gets put away, like you said, until you come back to it and go, now I know what I want to do with it. You just sit there and you're just pulling your hair out practically trying to figure out what to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
We were talking about, going back to the actual topic, like the jousting game that I want to do. So I bought all those Essex miniatures. And, because there's, maybe no more than 10 figures that I really need to play the game. Really all I need is 2, right? But, if I want to incorporate everybody, those figures are going to get painted really, really well because there's only 10.
Yep.
But if I had to do, an entire 100 Years War army, they won't get painted that well.
Speaking of somebody that would really like that jousting, that's really good at doing that kind of stuff.
Hey, Dan's here.
Dan!
We have a number of folks joining us a little late, right before we're getting ready to go.
And we got the answer. Yes, that is Harley Quinn. So there we go.
Cool.
Got that answered.
Can't wait to see that. That'll look great.
Yeah. Let's see. We got some coat stuff. That can be interesting. It's like doing camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You think that camouflage would be easy. Sometimes it's not.
No.
No, I would say it's the opposite. To make it look like something, something that's made to look like, to blend into, nature or whatever. It oftentimes there's a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of very symmetrical repetition, that goes into making good looking camouflage in some ways. Yeah.
The last time I had to paint some 15 mil miniatures, some Russians, Heinz, and aircraft, I went and I drove 120 miles to get my brother's airbrush so I could use it and go speed up the process a little bit, blend it together.
So, we were talking about the 1/16 scale tank that I was painting. I actually saw somebody else use an airbrush to paint in steel wool to paint a leather coat. So what they did was they took the steel wool and pulled it apart so that it was kind of shredded, right?
Yeah.
Then they'd hold that up to the leather coat they were painting, and then they'd paint. First they had painted the coat in the lightest color that the coat was going to be. Then they put the steel wool over it and hit it with an airbrush. And that left just enough of the darker color in small dots that it looks like texture.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You could do the same thing with camouflage, so long as you work out your pattern the right way, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually tried that on that 1/16 scale tank, and it did work. Although I think the steel wool I have, I didn't, break apart enough.
Mm-hmm.
But you could try that.
Absolutely.
That would be an interesting technique to try.
Yeah, and sometimes, like the rest of us, we all watch a bunch of YouTube videos and we go, "Ooh, that'll be cool." I have that model over there that looks like crap. I'm going to try it on that one.
And that's the thing, is that you try something and you don't really care if you mess it up or just practice on.
Yeah,
and you don't end up with your HQ looking like the worst in the army.
Like I have some what is it, the 1/72 scale or 1/31 scale artillery building pieces. They're like the bombed out pieces of houses. I practice how to paint bricks on that.
Yeah.
You just paint a brick, paint another brick, paint a brick, and then trying to tie all that together so that it looked like something that was good. And there was a time when I was trying to paint a lot of terrain for my gaming. And so, I bought that specifically to practice so I wouldn't screw up my gaming terrain.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I learned a lot about, with dry brushing and working on terrain. It was working on terrain is getting that effect of weathering on stuff. And a lot of people like to paint their buildings, like wood buildings, and they're kind of a browns and stuff, they're fresh. But I always like to go with the grays and weathered and it's been out in the sun forever and a day. That's actually a lot more work than people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I actually thought about doing a YouTube video on just textures. So last year, about this time, the family and I went to Disney, and we went into the new Star Wars Galaxy, I can't think of what it's called. But we're waiting to get on the Millennium Falcon ride. And as you're walking through the cantina and all that kind of area, you know, they put on the walls and all this streaking and all this texture. And I'm like, that would actually make a really cool video. So I started taking photos of all stuff so you could see they painted rust spots.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in obviously, you know, live scale, you know, real life scale. And you can see when you really look at it, it's not just red in there, right? There's blue, there's purples, there's yellow, there's red, there's some green. It's amazing when you really start to look at it as a whole, you know, as a piece made up of several pieces, just how much is actually in there. And I thought about doing it, but I haven't quite figured out how to really present it yet to be able to do it. But I thought, you know, doing textures like that for weathering for tanks or vehicles or airplanes or, you know, clothing even, you know, look at a pair of jeans, you know, really well-worn pair of jeans that's faded and everything else. And you got dark splotches of blue and pure white someplace. And you got, you know, threads of white coming through in other places. Well, you know, you're looking at all of that and trying to incorporate it into whatever you're painting. If you can train yourself to look for that, you'll start to paint it. You know,
if you want to really learn how to figure that kind of stuff out, paint watercolor.
Yeah,
it's like when you paint watercolor, it's like individuals that paint oil and everything look at it, it's like, oh, I made a mistake, I can just paint over top of it.
Right.
And when you paint watercolors, you really have to think hard about how because you got to save your whites. And you just go from it and you're just like, okay, how do I attack this? You know, it's like, all right, I know this is going to be dark, and you got to learn how to make gradients.
Right.
And I applied that to my large scale models. Is that if you look at them, it's like you could see the gradient that I put into it. And one of the hardest miniatures I ever paint was that small little one I got from Nick, the British Wargamer. I think it was from ChillCon, and it has a face on it, but there's no detail.
Right.
It's like trying to paint an egg.
Yeah.
And it's like I actually had to really work on getting the actually skin tones and get details and everything into it. And that is one thing I applied one skill set that I learned and then bring it into another.
Yep, similar like what you were saying, Victor, when you felt doing the larger scale stuff made the smaller stuff look better.
So, you know, about practice, right? I can't even remember where I bought this bust from, but I'm going to practice skin tones on this. And it's a little washed out with this light at the moment, but, you know, I already kind of started to paint the eyes on it. And then I'm going to go back and start, you know, just practicing skin tones. Because you know, they're some of the toughest things that you can do.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I practice a lot. I, you know, find things or I screw things up and I go back and practice.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Curtis has just chimed in and he says 2 hours tonight. Love the painting discussion. We typically do. We started at an hour and a half on the show, and it's kind of increased incrementally. But I think we are significantly past our typical time, and I think part of it is we just really enjoyed the discussion tonight. It's flowed very well. We've had some late joiners on the show, but really some interesting topics tonight. But I think we are actually hitting that point of closure for the show. Okay. We don't do just sort of open-ended, but we usually kind of stay within 2 hours usually, and we're at the 2.5 mark. So, but yeah, no, like I've really enjoyed the show tonight. Lots of great discussion.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I really appreciate you coming on, Victor.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was great. I enjoy talking to you guys. With everything that's been going on in the world, being able to sit down with friends and just talk about the hobby and talk about painting and talk about how we keep messing ourselves up when we try. It's perfect.
I can't agree anymore. I mean, I was thinking about that even just thinking of getting ready for the show tonight. It's that having stuff like this is nice. It's just being able to take your day-to-day struggles and worries and be able to just sit down and talk about the stuff we like with friends, and then appreciating all the folks in the comments that add to the show, which are a huge part of this show. Rusty, any closing thoughts from your side?
It is really good bouncing off ideas, especially when you got individuals that have the same interests as you and played the same games or done the same things and picked up the same type of brush and tried the same type of techniques and everything.
And we all have horror stories.
Yes, we all have horror stories. They keep coming. They never stop. But that's the thing, just overcoming them. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. Any other closing thoughts, Nick? Or Vic, you want to put out there?
First of all, thank you again, guys, for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. Like I said, just being able to talk to anybody about the hobby right now has been wonderful. And I would look forward to doing it again if you ever invite me back.
You're more than welcome to come back.
Absolutely. We typically always look to our guests to be repeat guests.
If you ever watched any of our shows, we have individuals been on several times. So you're more than welcome. And the next show will be in 2 weeks. So we're looking at the 15th of Thursday, October 15th.
Yep, that'll be on Heresy Productions, my channel. So we do actually rotate back and forth. And for those of you that don't know, in order to kind of get updates as to when we do our shows, we do have a Facebook page, the Musty Wargamers. Mainly, many of the people that are on that page will just throw up stuff that they're painting and things like that, or information. But we also will use that as an outlet to let you guys know when the next episode is. So, all right. Well, thanks for everybody for joining. Both you, Victor, and everybody in the comments. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
All right, 2 weeks. And same time, same bat channel. Different bat with different
channel, same time.
Same time. All right. In a month, it'll be the same
time. All right. It's time to turn it off.
We're all messed up. All right. We'll see you
later, everybody.
In a couple weeks. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming in and chatting with all of us. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See ya. And I think it's